Hey everybody, this is Jon Ziegler, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with Jon and Pete.
You are indeed with our special guest, Jon Ziegler. Jon, your show that you did with us before, and for our listeners, it's worth it to scroll back and get caught up and listen to the Jon Ziegler episodes. It's a two-part episode because we asked you for an hour of your life, and by the time we were out of there, I think we had captured just shy of 2 hours, and we couldn't edit out 1 second of what we had done because it was such, it was...
You guys did a great job with that. That was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, but...
You made it easy, though.
You did, and you provided all the revelations that made that particular episode not only compelling listening, but really eye-opening regarding the justice system. Now, the thing that, I kept pretty quiet about, and I tend to keep pretty quiet because I segment my life from my fun life, this being part of my fun life, is that for a living, I am a private investigator.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was and I do a lot of criminal defense.
Mm-hmm.
So I was being a private investigator as I tried to sit quietly and listen to you. And believe me, it was hard work to sit quietly and listen to you. And I know I didn't do it the whole time because I wanted to,
Okay.
But I knew that the best thing to do, whoever's out there listening who's an investigator will say, is while your subject is going crazy, let him go. That's where you get the info.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we had stats on the percentage of time that you talked versus the percentage of time that we talked, because you were very generous. But there have been things that happened in the case since we last talked, and to compel our listeners who may have missed those first episodes, you guys got to go get caught up, because what we're talking about is the case of Jerry Sandusky, a man who is sitting in prison right now. Our friend Jon Ziegler says absolutely wrongfully. I try to be as objective as possible, but man, you have such compelling evidence and a very compelling timeline in this case that makes it very difficult to understand why nobody will just look at the timeline.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you guys being willing to look at the timeline and everything else, because very few others have the courage to do so, which is why this whole injustice happened. There's several layers to why this is a fascinating case. Obviously, the first one is if you happen to give a damn about Penn State University or the Jerry Sandusky case or college football, that's an element that gets people's interest. But to me, this is so much bigger, so much larger. To me, it is about the criminal justice system, but even more than that, it's about how our news media, when they rush to judgment in a particular narrative, and when they put white hats on one group of people and they put black hats on another group of people, and that narrative is particularly powerful, look out. Because it doesn't just drive the beginning of a story, it drives the entire story. And in this particular case, to refresh people's recollection, we're happen to be talking on the 5th anniversary, for all intents and purposes, of this story. The reason why this one went haywire more than any other, a few others have happened, but they got reversed. Like, for instance, the
Duke Lacrosse
or the Virginia gang rape situation. In fact, there, just a couple days ago, there was the verdict in that Rolling Stone case where they found that the Rolling Stone was liable in that story of the University of Virginia rape case. Interestingly, there is a distant but somewhat relevant connection to the Sandusky case in that reporter who blew that story and who was found liable. But that was able to be corrected because it didn't have the turbocharge that this case had. This case had turbocharge because of one name, Joe Paterno. The Joe Paterno aspect of this took what would have been a fairly normal case and put it into the stratosphere. And that was why 5 years ago this week there was this explosion of news media coverage. Without him, as a matter of fact, it's important to remember, the first couple of days of this story, it breaks over a weekend of a college football weekend, there was very little news coverage outside of State College, Pennsylvania, because no one remembered who Jerry Sandusky was. At that time, he'd been a retired assistant coach for about a decade. But people knew who Joe Paterno was. As a matter of fact, the week before, he had just become the winningest coach in the history of college football. And that particular weekend, 5 years ago, Penn State was scheduled to play a home game against Nebraska, which would have theoretically been Joe Paterno's last home game after 61 years at Penn State. So you have a perfect storm here that is brewing, that is working on many different levels. And when this story breaks 5 years ago, the media jumps to a conclusion for a variety of reasons, and we are still paying for that conclusion now because now so many elements, so many very powerful elements, are totally invested in a narrative that I believe is not only false, it's preposterous, and there's no evidence for it. And I have accepted a long time ago that I'm not going to win this battle. I'm basically one guy against the world. But I set out to find out what the truth of this case was because I knew immediately the story made no sense. I've coached high school football. I've covered college football. I've covered pro football. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I knew enough about what Penn State was about, Joe Paterno was about. I wasn't a big fan, which was actually good because it allowed me to see this case with open eyes. But immediately I was like, what? Seriously?
Where did it start? What was the first thing that told you this doesn't add up?
Well, interestingly, the story itself, as we were told 5 years ago, is that a graduate assistant coach, then a graduate assistant by the name of Mike McQueary, had walked in on Jerry Sandusky 10 years earlier in a shower, saw him anally raping a young boy, told Joe Paterno, and that basically nobody did anything about it.
Let's stop there for a minute, John. I want to go step by step through this because you and Pete and I have discussed this, and I want our listeners to have the benefit of all of the context in that one sentence that you just said. First of all, it's important to note that I think Jon Stewart said it best when what was the name of the guy who was Axelrod?
Yeah, David Axelrod.
He told David Axelrod that the news media today is built around 9/11. And what he meant by that was to say that when you turn on the news, the graphics, the punchiness, as fast as news channels move, they are built for some enormous tragedy with a bunch of complexity and the sorting out of it right now. So that means that we want our news the way we take our action movies.
That's a really good way to put it, and this is a great example of that. This was the 9/11 of sports tragedies.
Right.
I mean, to bring down Joe Paterno, who was by far the most revered name in all of college football, and to do it in 3 days before his last home football game, that's drama. I mean, that's Greek tragedy right there.
And it takes an avalanche.
Exactly. And to your point about the news,
it's a panic.
Well, exactly, a
Right.
panic.
Yeah.
But the news media, to your point, they need a pressure point to force the coverage. See, sometimes the story breaks and there's nothing, like for instance, Cosby. Okay, the Cosby thing has been big, right? But the Cosby thing has not been anywhere to this level because Bill Cosby was retired. He's not on NBC right now.
Right.
There's nothing that's driving. We must get to the bottom of this now to stop something from happening. Well, the something from happening was Joe Paterno basically having a pep rally for a pedophile protector at home in a home football game on national TV on ESPN. And ESPN, by the way, I say this all the time, but it's important to remember this. That week 5 years ago was about as slow a sports week in November as you're ever going to find. The NBA was on strike. Baseball had just finished. No one cares about hockey. Football is in its finished lull, kind of mid-season lull. So this was, and during football season, ESPN
it was in the sweet spot for basketball, and there was no basketball.
Right. There's no NBA. College basketball hasn't really started yet. I mean, so and ESPN during football season has not much to talk about from Monday till Saturday. So the reality is that there was a lot of elements to the perfect storm here, but no question that what you just said there about what Jon Stewart mentioned played a huge role in this. The news media is always looking for something that we've never seen before. It's got to be bigger. It's got to be more dramatic. It's got to be more amazing. And this story immediately sounded like, holy shit, what the hell's going on? And not just is what the hell's going on, but going on at an institution that had been revered for its ethics. That was another part of this. And by the way, a minor element of the news media's glee over this story, and I'm a political conservative, Joe Paterno was a squeaky clean, some would say sanctimonious, I don't believe that, but the media looked at him like that, as a sanctimonious, squeaky clean Republican conservative who ran an incredibly above-the-board program. For the news media to be able to tear him down, there was some extra glee.
They were thirsty.
Yeah, there was some extra glee involved
in
that. If this had been the coach at a program, that wasn't revered and that didn't put themselves up on a pedestal, I don't think there's the venom that there was in this one.
We're talking about a guy whose statue was already sitting in front of the stadium.
Right. He's alive, he's coaching, and he's already got a statue in front of the stadium. It's not there anymore, and I doubt it'll ever be put back, even though it should be, but that was part of the whole passion play here. It was almost a literal, he was already dead at that point, but the taking down of his statue, I mean, even they put over the face almost like they were putting the statue in the guillotine or they were hanging the statue. I mean, it was all so Greek tragedy, and every bit of it was driven by emotion, not by facts, not by logic, and so to answer your question more directly, the first moment I realized there was a problem, and this is going to sound weird to people, one of the attorneys for the administrators who got charged, a woman by the name of Caroline Roberto, I believe it was 5 years ago yesterday. I think it was the 7th of November. She held a press conference. Now, lawyers hold press conferences all the time saying their clients are innocent, but she was the attorney for the athletic director at Penn State named Tim Curley, who was integral in this whole story. And she didn't just say Tim Curley was innocent. She was off the charts, like I thought her head was going to explode, that this is outrageous, this is insane, this didn't happen. And I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute. This woman believes what she's saying. This is not a lawyer who's just simply going through the motions, hey, let's reserve judgment and all that kind of stuff. So the idea that so if there wasn't a cover-up, then something's amiss here, because if this happened and nothing occurred, there's got to be a cover-up. So there's either a cover-up or there's not. And I'm not a conspiracy person. I believe conspiracies are very, very difficult to pull off because people aren't that good at them. They're not that smart. And especially in this day and age where we've got the internet and everything leaks out eventually, whether it's true or not. So anyway, that was when I first thought, okay, something's not right here. At first, I just started writing a few articles. I think for the Bleacher Report, I wrote an article, a couple articles. And then I kind of drifted away from it for a while thinking, okay, Sandusky must be guilty. I mean, I just presumed that part. I was worried about Paterno. And, Paterno dies a couple months later. But when he dies, things had calmed down slightly. And he got the funeral that he deserved. And I thought, okay, this was a rush to judgment and he got fired. But in the long run, is there really going to be that much damage? Because, again, I'm presuming Sandusky is guilty. And, so there was some collateral damage, and that sucks, and it's unfair. But it looked to me as if there was still hope for Paterno's legacy to be restored. But then a whole series of dominoes fell after that in what I refer to as everyone covering their ass phase of this. And when that leads to the free report, Sandusky gets convicted, the free report comes out, the NCAA levies all these insane sanctions, the statute comes down, the settlements by Penn State get paid out for $100 million. And by the way, still to this day, we're having repercussions occur because of those dominoes. So once that narrative is accepted, and everyone in charge has a huge self-interest to accept it, including the news media, now, it's basically trying to, erase something that's been drawn in granite. I mean, it's almost impossible.
Don't blow past the point.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Yeah, $100 million.
Well, yeah, that's key.
Well, let's just take a beat for a second. I really appreciate that summary of things that have happened, but we really want to slow down, take a step back, and talk specifically about the incident that I believe was the media's tipping point, which was the Mike McQueary incident.
Right. Exactly. And that's the essence of the whole case. It is everything. I mean, everything flows from the McQueary episode.
Right.
And I mean everything, including the investigation. And you guys will appreciate this as investigators. I am convinced to this day, I mean, everything about this case is upside down. Everything. But one of the most absurd elements of Joe Paterno getting blamed for all this is I am totally convinced that if investigators, after having come to Mike McQueary 10 years after this alleged incident occurs and say to him, hey, Mike, we've heard you might have seen something with Jerry Sandusky in a shower. What did you see? And I believe they manipulated him into saying he saw something that he didn't actually see. If at that point they go to Joe Paterno and Joe Paterno says, what? What are you talking about? I don't remember anything like this. That doesn't jive with what Mike told me. What are you talking about? He's the most powerful and respected man in the state of Pennsylvania. If that was Joe Paterno's reaction at the age of 84 years old, which frankly, any 84-year-old is not remembering exactly what he told somebody or was told in a 10-minute conversation, as busy as Joe Paterno is 10 years earlier. If that had been Joe Paterno's reaction, I am as positive as I can be, not having been there at the time, not obviously been involved in the investigation. Having looked at it for 5 years, I'm positive Jerry Sandusky never even gets arrested.
Yeah.
Because if Paterno's not backing up McQueary, nobody else is backing up McQueary. The athletic director I've already mentioned doesn't back him up. The head of the campus police doesn't back him up on what he says. The president of the university was never told anything about a sexual act. Legal counsel for Penn State, Wendell Courtney, has just recently testified in the Mike McQueary civil trial. He was never informed of anything other than horseplay. Mike McQueary's own dad testified at that trial saying he didn't believe what Mike told him that night was reportable to the police. Dr. Dranoff, who was in that conversation with Mike McQueary and his dad, said the exact same thing, and he was a mandated reporter for child sex abuse as a doctor. So nobody backs up Mike McQueary except...
Stop right there.
Yeah.
Except...
Joe Paterno, and he does it, I believe, out of fear of his own memory not being true at the age of 84.
Right.
He's very insecure about his memory, and he's very loyal to his guys. Mike is one of his guys. Mike is not just his assistant coach. He quarterbacked for Joe at Penn State. He's an assistant, and he's not just any assistant. He's the assistant that at that time, people forget about this, Joe is effectively a figurehead football coach head coach at that time. He's not really running the program. And when you just look up pictures, Google pictures of Mike McQueary and Joe Paterno on the sidelines. Mike is Joe's only conduit to what's happening on the field. Joe's not even wearing headphones. It's Mike who wears the headphones and occasionally will take off the headphone to listen to what the hell Joe is saying to him, put it back on. I believe he's almost kind of pretending to listen to Joe. That's the level of trust that Joe has in Mike. And so because he's a loyal guy to his own players and his own coaches, and because of their relationship, I don't think it even occurs to him that Mike could be wrong about this or mistaken or saying something that's not true.
However, let us say this. The incident that we're talking about and the details behind that incident before we blow past them are that Mike McQueary wandered into a locker room at Penn State and witnessed the rape of a child in the shower.
That's what was reported 5 years ago as we speak. Interestingly, Mike has never testified to that. And as a matter of fact, in this most recent civil trial that I'm sure people have read a headline about, because Mike got $7.3 million, which I know we're going to talk about. It's unflippin' believable that he getting anything out of this. But in that trial, there was an email that was presented, which in a rational world would be earth-shattering to the narrative of this case. And if we had known about this email 5 years ago, Joe Paterno doesn't get fired. Mike immediately wrote an email to the Attorney General's office of Pennsylvania after the presentment came out. People need to remember, the report of that anal rape came from a leaked
grand jury presentment. It's a 23-page document that might as well be dog shit. I mean, that's what a grand jury presentment document is. It's the prosecutors trying to trump up their case as much as they possibly can, and it was never supposed to be made public.
For folks who are unaware of the process, is really, as you describe it, this is the DA seeing what in the fuck will stick.
Right.
And they throw everything at the wall to see what will stick in this grand jury presentment.
Exactly.
And what shakes out is typically what the charge looks like.
Right. And so in that presentment, they say Mike McQueary witnessed anal rape, which is obviously horrendous, sounds horrific, and would blow anybody's mind.
It is horrific. Let's talk about why it's horrendous, though, and why it's so
do we really
damn
need to?
Unbelievable.
Well,
not the act itself, but
right.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable that someone could witness that and do nothing. First of all, I mean that's what McQueary
We're not
does.
just talking about a person witnessing as described, but doing nothing. We're talking about an old man,
right,
committing this heinous act,
right,
and a much younger,
right,
athlete.
Right. McQueary claimed it was a 10 to 12-year-old boy. We would later find out that the only person who's ever claimed to be that boy and who was paid by Penn State $3 million for being that boy was a month short of his 14th birthday, which I think is a significant difference. A difference between a 10-year-old and a 1 month short of your 14th birthday. Something very significant has happened between those two. It's called puberty.
That's right. That's right. You begin to get your man shoulders. And you begin to get your man attitude. And
plus, you know what sex is.
Yes.
I mean, there's no naivete going on here. I mean, plus you're physically strong.
Right. The difference between a 10-year-old boy being taken advantage of by an old man and a 14-year-old, sure, some people mature later. We're talking about football players.
Right. Well, by the way, this guy, to your point, this guy named Alan Myers, on the date of the McQueary episode, is 2.5 years away. Not a short period of time, but not a super long period of time away. He's 2.5 years away from winning a varsity letter on his high school football team. So this is not...
We're not talking about a pushover.
Right. This is not a young little boy. And by the way, he's, I guess at that point, 5 years away from being a Marine. So, I mean...
a lot can change in 5 years, but let's talk about Mike McQueary at the time.
Okay, so Mike McQueary is a 7-year-old, 230-pound, 6'5" guy who's fully clothed. You know, he allegedly, and I want to make sure I go back to that email. He writes in that email that he believes his words were twisted in that grand jury presentment. So he's already, immediately when it comes out, he's saying, whoa, guys...
That's not what I said.
That's not what I said. What are you doing here?
Let's assume for a moment, before we get to that's not what I said. Let's assume for a moment that what was interpreted was somewhere in the same zip code is accurate.
Well, here's what McQueary has said, and he's changed his story many times. But here's the basics of it because it's important. And look, if this happened, it's horrendous and horrible, and I'd be the first person to be condemning everybody involved. But I don't believe that's what happened, and here's why. Because McQueary's story is, not only does it not make sense, even if you go by his own words, it doesn't prove anything. He says he heard, not saw, heard sounds that he interpreted as being sexual. Now, I agree, sounds are significant, but we have a statement from the boy, Alan Myers, and from Jerry Sandusky, two completely different statements made at different times that have been completely consistent, that they say that the slapping sounds was towel slapping. And so, there is an explanation for the potential sounds, but okay, I'm not going to buy it just because that both Myers and Sandusky say it. So what else does McQueary say?
The two people involved.
Right, I'm not saying that they're...
alleged to have happened.
Right. I agree that it's significant, but it doesn't prove it because obviously they could be lying. Mm-hmm. But let's go through what McQueary then says. So he hears the sounds and he turns the corner and he looks not into the shower. He looks into a mirror, like, where the stalls are, I guess, or the sinks are. Sure. There's a mirror, and through the mirror, he sees the reflection of what's going on in the shower. And by his own acknowledgement, he says he sees for 2 or 3 seconds. 2 or 3 seconds. He sees Sandusky and this boy, which I strongly believe to be Alan Myers, almost 14 years old, he sees them engaged in something that he's not sure what the hell it is. He's never called it anal rape. He has said that it is sexual, but he's never explained what the hell that is. Because, I mean, I'm almost 50 years old. I've had a lot of sex in my life, never gay sex.
Good job.
But I'm pretty familiar with the basic sex acts. So if it's not anal rape, which he has said consistently, he doesn't believe he saw an anal rape, then what the hell is it?
Okay, wait, I want to slow down now and add some things in here. So Mike McQueary maybe sees a sex act, and we could talk about Jerry Sandusky grooming.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete Turner.
And if you like the show,
do us a favor.
Yeah, share it.
That's the biggest thing, honestly.
All your social media outlets, all your friends, let them know the ones that you like.
Yeah. I mean, we make this show for you guys. If you think it's great, say so. Say so by sharing it. Say so by putting a comment in after the show.
Also, if you go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts, give us a rating. Give us a review. If you think the show is great, please give us 5 stars and say so. And if you think the show really sucks, please give us 5 stars and say so.
Because, heck, we're listening.
That's right.
You can't be more approachable than us. We want to make the show better. If there's something that we're missing, let us know. That really is how you help us.
That's right. Tell us all about it. Thanks for listening.
And now, back to the show.
Alan Myers.
Right, sure.
So,
could be grooming. Could be
but
grooming.
Still doesn't account for Mike McQueary being in there and doing nothing.
Well, I'm glad you were. Thank you for
doesn't
that.
Testify to this, you're saying?
Let's talk to the 6'5",
Right.
physically capable, athletic guys
By his
out
own-
in our audience right now.
Right.
If you walk into
Thank
a
you.
locker room and you perceive what you think might
Right.
be a sexual act between
Right.
an old man and a young
Yes.
boy, listeners, what the fuck do you do?
How
You
about,
beat the
how
shit
about just
out
the
of
fact
him.
that there's a sex act
That's
going
right.
on in a locker room, and you're not going to wait, is someone fucking in here?
Well,
Let's say that you might think you got it wrong, and I thought it was a young boy, but,
Yeah.
but
Right.
I'm going to go see at least.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
hot chick. Who knows?
Well, interestingly, I believe McQueary has said that he originally thought it might have been a man and a woman when he heard the sounds, which of course is a little weird for him to immediately determine that that's what he's seeing, on a Friday night in a locker room. But let's. I don't want to. I'm happy to go through all this if you guys find it interesting. But here's the thing. Your point about McQueary doing nothing is really important, because by his own statements, he says what he does is he goes and he slams a locker door as if to tell them, hey, there's somebody here. And effectively, these aren't his words, but this is, I think, a fair interpretation of what he's saying is, hey, look, I broke the mood. I felt like I can leave now. I mean, I'm not going to identify the boy. I'm not going to get him out of that situation. I'm not going to beat the crap out of Sandusky. I'm not even going to say anything to Sandusky. But I'm going to slam the door. They know I'm here, so Sandusky's going to stop raping him.
Now, right now, the more timid members of our audience are going, that's what I would do.
No.
I would make a noise. I would create a distraction. As long as everything ceased, that would be okay. Now, let's get to the college athletes. A football attitude, a sports attitude, an
Right.
attitude that exists in sports where you value, team and fairness
Right.
and justice and those things. That guy, you guys out there, does not just slam a locker door.
Right.
We know plenty of those guys.
And by the way, not only is he physically very impressive, but he's a former quarterback.
Right.
He is quarterbacked on national television in front of 90,000 people. This is not a guy who's going to choke under
pressure.
Under pressure.
He knows what pressure looks like, and I'll
Right.
tell you
Or
what,
mild-
he's got a motherfucker of a right hand.
Right. Exactly.
And for our mild-mannered listeners, what would you do next? You shut the locker door and you're afraid. I would grab a phone. I would let somebody know. And who did he
Well,
let
he
know
d-
immediately?
he called his dad. He calls his dad immediately afterwards and says, "Dad, I saw something I need to talk to you about." But it's important to point out that his dad and the guy that they spoke with, that Dr. Tranoff, both say, even against their own self-interest, all these years later, nothing Mike said that night indicated that we should go to the police. That the word sex was not used. And look, I want to make something very clear, that if the boy Alan Myers had not done the things that he did after this event and said the things that he did after this event, I would just presume, okay, you know what? Mike must have seen something really bad, and things went weird, and for whatever reason he choked or whatever it is. It wouldn't make total sense to me, but I would accept it. And because we're dealing with obviously a very sensitive subject, and I'm not going to be someone who's going to be apologizing for any sort of a sex act against a boy or anybody that is a minor and is not obviously not capable of consent. But that's not the case. The story of Alan Myers, I think, puts an entirely different context on this entire story. And that's why I've been so passionate about this. And that's why what happened last week was so incredibly important, because Alan Myers never testified at trial. Nobody testified at trial as victim number 2. Now, to me, this is more ridiculous and significant than the idea that Mike McQueary did nothing.
Victim number 2 being the avalanche victim,
right?
The tipping point.
Exactly.
Victim.
And so, I mean, this is so important. We've already talked about the absurdity of Mike McQueary doing nothing. But to me, that pales in comparison with the absurdity that you have the biggest case, the most publicized case of alleged child sex abuse in the history of the country. Not even close, really, that I can think of, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, not even close. And so you have a situation where all this publicity, and we're supposed to believe that the boy who was in that shower, who did something to him, rape, whatever you want to call it, never comes forward? Never. And even after everybody in the world knows Penn State's going to be paying out millions of dollars for this thing, that is nonsensical. Right. It is utterly absurd because you got to remember, it's not a situation where this kid would still be a young boy. It's 10 years later, so now he's an adult. Number 2, it's not a situation where anybody is siding with Jerry Sandusky. Right. Sandusky is immediately, especially once Joe Paterno is fired, he is immediately persona non grata in State College, which plays a huge role in why his defense sucked, because they were up until the time of his arrest, they were very confident. They thought they had the case under control. But you guys know better than anybody how this works. When you become toxic, all of a sudden the people that were going to testify on your behalf won't even answer your phone calls.
Start disappearing fast.
It's amazing.
And who wants to represent you?
Well, interestingly, I'm of the belief, and I've been through a lot of situations that are similar to this. Not a lot, but somewhat similar situations. And I've talked to a lot of attorneys about this phenomenon, and almost all of them agree with this, that the innocent guy is the most difficult to represent, because they don't understand the trouble they're in.
Right.
And they think, well, I didn't do anything, so I don't. OJ hires the dream team. Right.
The innocent guy says, no, truth will come out.
Right. Truth comes
Justice
out.
Will be
I don't need a dream team. I'm going to go with Joe Amendola, who's Jerry's attorney, this guy I've known for years who doesn't really do cases like this. I don't need to worry about it because I didn't do anything. This is all a big misunderstanding.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. I mean, and I've seen it in many situations. The innocent person is the most vulnerable to a railroad job because they don't realize, holy crap, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
They think that the system...
I'm looking down the barrel of being down for a long
OJ
time.
knows immediately he's fucked.
Right.
Because he did it. And he knows he did it.
And his back's against the wall, so he's going to fight hard.
He's going to do everything. Interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that. One of the many, many things, hundreds of things, people don't understand about what happened in this case, I'm convinced that part of what got Jerry Sandusky in trouble, including in that infamous Bob Costas interview, which was a political, public relations disaster, I still think Jerry is thinking at that time he doesn't want to say anything negative about these boys because he thinks this misunderstanding will be resolved. And he's so bizarrely and naively caring about them that he doesn't go on the attack and search and destroy them. He's thinking this is all going to get fixed, and I love these kids, and this can't all be really happening.
We're all going to coexist in State College after this is done.
As a matter of fact, to my point, about a week or two before the trial, he tells his attorney, Joe Amendola, he says, Joe, can't I just talk to these guys and figure out what's going on here? Yeah. And Joe's like, Jerry, you have no fucking idea how screwed you are.
This is, yeah,
you are in big trouble. He had no idea. None. Because he is, and I've gotten to know him very well, he is super naive, super Christian. He had lived a charmed life up until that point.
Yeah.
And so he's thinking, this can't really be happening.
The good will emerge.
The truth will win out. And no, it hasn't, and it won't. And so anyway, back to the boy. I mean, the prosecution would have us believe, laughably, and yet the media has bought into this. The prosecution told the jury at trial that the identity of victim 2, who never testified, they had McQueary testify, but they somehow couldn't find a boy to come, or a man now, to come forward and say, I'm the guy who was in the shower, which you would think would be a really huge hole in a prosecution case.
Yeah. Especially since that guy's going to get paid.
Right. He's going to get paid huge amounts of money. And yet, for some reason, the news media was completely uncurious, if that's even a word. They're lacking in curiosity about where the hell's this victim to? Why are we not finding him? So the prosecution, feeling as if, well, maybe one juror might think the same thing, they come up with an explanation. Their explanation is victim 2 is known only to God. That's what they said. That's what they told the jury. Victim 2 is known only to God. Now, that became a major issue in Jerry's appeal, which is why this Alan Myers guy, who I've referred to several times, finally, for the first time, 5 years later, testified in a hearing because the judge forced him to do so. Now, in a logical world, I always say this case is totally upside down and backwards. In a logical world, the first person everyone should have spoken to 5 years ago would have been Alan Myers, okay? So here's the kid who was there. What does he have to say? Yeah. That would be the first person. In this upside-down case, he's literally the last person that we spoke to. But something incredibly important happened between his first story and his current story, which is...
Can I guess?
Go for it.
A whole lot of fucking paydays.
A whole lot of money, right? Yeah. So, and there's no question that when I attended the hearing and stay in just outside of State College last Friday, and I'm glad I did, because if I had been relying on the news media coverage of it, I would have been very confused. But I'm not confused at all, because I know exactly what happened and how it all went down, and why it is that this case is. I refer to this case now as the truth being in a casket. The casket is encased in concrete. The concrete is inside a bomb shelter. And the key to get into the bomb shelter just got swallowed by Alan Myers. And so that's basically where we are.
That's like Abraham Lincoln. The truth is Abraham Lincoln, buried in a vault. Yeah,
there you go. So
wait, before we go too much further, when Sandusky is sitting there in trial, what evidence is he looking at against him?
Well, that's a great point. And this is why this case is so frustrating. Because I've even joked with Joe Amendola, his attorney, that Amendola should have planted some real evidence against, quote unquote, real evidence against Jerry, some sort of DNA or something, so that they could fight something on appeal.
Right.
But because there was no actual evidence against Jerry in the trial, there's nothing to fight on appeal. In a bizarre way, Jerry is in a far worse situation on appeal because there was no fucking evidence. That sounds counterintuitive, but I refer to it as it's like he's fighting ghosts. Because if
nothing to punch.
Right. If all you have is statements from people who got paid millions of dollars. By the way, each and every single one of them contradicts prior statements and prior actions by each and every one of these accusers.
Say that again with more detail, because that's important. So you're saying that
there is not one accusation, not one. You can look it up. Not one accusation against him at trial that was made by somebody who did not, prior to that statement, contradict it by saying nothing ever happened, and who also contradicted it by their own actions towards Jerry Sandusky. Every single one of them had relationships with Jerry Sandusky that went way beyond a casual, hey,
Right.
get away from me type of deal. Every single one of them denied it in their first story, and every single one of them got paid millions of dollars. Every single one. I can go through. There were 8 people who testified at trial.
Well, hold on. Before you go through, let me just back up one more time and make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that every victim that got paid started with one story.
Yep.
And changed their story.
Every single one.
Once the possibility of getting paid became a reality.
Well, that's a supposition. I think it's a logical one. I will say that they changed their position on what happened, and they changed their statement once lawyers got involved, therapists got involved,
right.
Once investigators came to them and I believe used manipulative tactics.
Right.
Like, for instance, we talked about this last time, but it certainly bears repeating. In the Victim 4 episode, which the prosecution ended up believing that Victim 4 was their star because their Victim 1 was terrible. The one who had been the only victim in this case, or accuser in this case, for 2 years, named Aaron Fisher, who wrote a book, which I urge anyone to read because it shows how ridiculous this whole case is. But Victim 4 became their star. And here's how Victim 4 came to his story. Victim 4 came to his story in this way. At first, Victim 4 said nothing ever happened. And then he was interviewed by investigators with his attorney there, which I always thought is odd because there's no need for him to have an attorney. He's an accuser. He's not, or not even
not
an accuser.
the accused.
He's not the accused. And at that point, he's not even really technically an accuser yet. So it's weird that he's got an attorney. And at first in this interview, he's not saying very much. He's giving them some grooming type stuff, things that are inappropriate. Things that are questionable, but he's not giving them what they really need as far as something clearly criminal, clearly sexual. So the attorney says to the investigators, can we turn off the recording? I want to talk to you guys. And they say, sure. Well, the thing is, they didn't actually turn off the recording. It's unclear to me whether or not the recording never got turned off or why, but for whatever reason, by accident, the following conversation is recorded. The attorney says to the investigators,
which attorney is this now?
This is the Victim 4 attorney, says to the investigators, hey, can we tell him that you guys have a whole lot of other kids that are saying X, Y, and Z and this sex act and this sex act, and maybe we'll get him to start talking. And the investigators say, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's a pretty close paraphrase, oh yeah, sure, we do this all the time. We'll tell them that we got X, Y, and Z, and we'll see what happens. So then they go back to Victim 4, and they tell him, oh, by the way, we've got X, Y, and Z, and guess what happens? All of a sudden, Victim 4 is telling a story that is totally different. He's telling them about sex acts. By the way, he's telling them about sex acts at 2 different bowl trips that Jerry took him on, which would require Dottie Sandusky to be in on this conspiracy because Dottie Sandusky actually walked in on one of the alleged episodes. And, I mean, Dottie and I have had a very roller coaster relationship for the last 3.5 years. We appeared on the Today Show together in an interview with Matt Lauer that I set up. Dottie and I sometimes don't get along at all, but I can assure you, Dottie Sandusky is the church lady. Dottie Sandusky, in no way, shape, or form, would have walked in on her husband in some sort of a sex act and not realized it or would have been okay with it in any way, shape, or form. It didn't happen, and I think I showed you guys before, and I'll show you again on my phone. There's a photograph of victim number 4 with Jerry on the front page of the local newspaper on the day that Jerry announces his retirement, which is after the first bowl game allegation and before the second bowl game allegation. Victim 4 is a rather big kid. They're playing miniature golf together. The kid seems rather happy to be there. And most importantly, Jerry tells the reporter what the kid's name is. So Jerry he's with the kid that he's abusing at the time, his squeeze, right, if you will, if you believe the story of him being a pedophile. This is his quote-unquote boyfriend. And not only does he take him miniature golfing to be photographed all together on the day his retirement is announced, but he's letting reporters know who the kid is. Yeah. Now, if you're a criminal mastermind, That makes no fucking sense.
Well, you know what? Let's say that that's possible. Let's say that there's a little bit of Stockholm syndrome on Alan Meyer's side, and let's say that there's a little overconfidence.
There's never been any proof of Stockholm syndrome in these cases.
Well, what my point here is that he goes back and, like, we sort of ran right past your comment about how investigators decided to tell him, there are a lot of other people telling stories too.
Right, which is really important.
That is absolutely crucial because suddenly it makes it okay.
Absolutely.
And in the mind of a guy who may or may not have a story, well, there's a bunch of other people who have a story. There's two things about that make it crucial. Number one, that justice should ought to be served. And there's a lot of kids out there. I'm going to think, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to toss my story onto that fire too, because if this son of a bitch is touching people,
right,
then let's put him away.
Ding, ding, ding.
Also, if suddenly, wait a minute, so all these kids are getting paid?
Well, he's got a lawyer with him.
If that incentive exists, it suddenly makes it a whole lot easier to go.
Ding, ding, ding. And by the way, I believe this is what happened to McQueary too. Imagine you're McQueary. You saw something in a year you don't remember. It's incredibly important to remember this. McQueary gets the date, the month, and the year wrong when he comes forward and tells his story. So how the hell do you not remember the year?
The date, the month, and the year.
And by the way, I say this all the time, but I think it's important. He says it happens after 9/11 when it actually happened before 9/11.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. There's your mind doesn't work that way.
And I wanted just because there's so much thing, and you have so many details, and it's just so hard to easy to blow by things that are important. Right. We're talking about an convicted child abuser,
right?
And
who will die in prison.
So take that and suspend that for a second, not to justify any part of that, but imagine this is you. Listener, fighting for your life, and there's a school about to pay all of your victims $100 million.
Right.
They're all going to hire a great lawyer because the lawyers are going to get paid.
Oh, huge.
And you've got therapists, and it's not that they're trying to do this on purpose, but there's a lot going against you. And the police are now stacking the deck on top of that.
And you said something important. Not that they're trying to do this on purpose. I believe that this became the search for the Loch Ness Monster. And that if you believe that there's a Loch Ness Monster, and everyone wants to catch the Loch Ness Monster, and you think you're helping catch the Loch Ness Monster, and by the way, it might help you monetarily, why not?
Yep.
And by the way,
pitchfork, everybody.
Grab a pitchfork. Thank you. And so McQueary is in the same boat as victim 4.
Sure.
McQueary thinks he saw something weird that bothered him 10 years before, even though he thinks it's 9 years before. And so investigators come to him, and they, I'm sure, tell him, we got a kid, Aaron Fisher, who we've been investigating his case for 2 years. He's been saying that Jerry's been engaging in sex acts with him. Can you help us? That has got to blow McQueary's mind. And by the way, you know what the proof of this is? McQueary's own testimony. This isn't just John Ziegler making stuff up. In December of 2011, McQueary says in a preliminary hearing, I told people around the program that Jerry shouldn't be around the lockers. Now that sounds like powerful evidence that McQueary knows he saw something horrible. Except on cross-examination, he's asked, did you start saying that to people before or after investigators came to you in late 2010 and told you about this child sex abuse investigation? And then McQueary on cross-examination acknowledges, yeah, it was after. Now, what does that tell you? McQueary got his mind changed about what happened.
His mind has to be changed because the school is in trouble because of how they handled the case and their lack of action to dealing with it. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, at the time of that testimony, Paterno has already been fired at that point. Yes.
Right, but I mean, the reason why they're paying hundreds of millions of dollars is because they didn't do a good enough job in stopping
or more important, I think directly, they want to pay off everybody to make this go away and to show the media that they get it and that they're basically self-flagellating, taking blame for things that they didn't do and probably never happened.
Right, but Mike McQueary doesn't have an insurance policy to cover $100 million, so he's got to find his own insurance policy.
That's true, and he found it. I mean, he found it. So anyway, we're getting back to the victim 4 story. So victim 4 tells a completely different story, as is everybody else in this case. There's not one kid. If there was even one, guys, If there was one who told a story, you don't even need to tell it the first time. But it would help if you gave a heads up to somebody contemporaneously. But you mean to tell me that not one of these guys told anybody contemporaneously? Right. Not one of them tells the story the first time that they're asked by police or investigators or therapists or whatever. Nobody. I mean, and forget about the fact that, as we mentioned before, there's no evidence. To the no evidence point, I'm not even asking for DNA. How about some pornography? Yeah. Anywhere.
Anything.
Not a shred. In this day and age.
Yeah.
In this day and age.
Is that even possible? Is there a
serial
child rapist that doesn't have?
Please, in all seriousness.
Yeah.
Please show me a case. I'm not an expert on this. I would love to see a serial pedophile.
Right.
With not a shred of pornography found anywhere in their house, on their computer, in their emails. I would doubt seriously.
And again, police willing to influence the evidence that isn't there already anyhow and coerce people. We know police do that in general.
And I think what happens here is, and there's evidence to this, I think the prosecutors and the investigators started to believe the reason why they couldn't find any evidence was because this was just such a tough case, because Sandusky was revered as a god in State College, and he's this criminal mastermind because he's a defensive coordinator of great genius, allegedly. I mean, he won 2 national championships at Penn State, but and was credited with the 1986 national championship where they beat Miami with 5 interceptions. But the point here is, I think, we have statements to this effect. Janelle Eschbach, the lead prosecutor for the Attorney General's office, basically says that. I have statements from one of the main attorneys saying that they believe that was what was driving Sandusky. So once they start believing, they start rationalizing why they're not finding any evidence.
Right.
And what the reality is, here's the reality of what Jerry Sandusky was when this case went down. Jerry Sandusky was a retired assistant football coach running a kids' charity and volunteering as a high school football coach. This is so important. When victim number 1, who's the only accuser in this case for 2 years, Aaron Fisher, when he makes his accusation, the only one for 2 years, they can't find anything else to back this up for 2 years. Aaron Fisher was 5 years old the last time Jerry Sandusky coached a football game. He doesn't look at Jerry Sandusky as a god.
Right.
He looks at Jerry Sandusky as a goofy guy who runs a charity and who won't leave him alone about his failing grades. That's how he sees Jerry.
Yeah.
I mean, but the media has created this bullcrap narrative of the god of folks. I don't care what position you are in. Once you leave that position, within a year or two, you're a nobody.
You're done.
You're a nobody.
And when you're 5, your brain's not even turned on all the way yet. Like, there's still stuff getting booted up. You don't even have memories a lot of times when you're yet young.
Well,
to deify somebody.
Well, that's true too. But my point is, Aaron Fisher never deified Jerry Sandusky, so he had no reason by his own story. Aaron Fisher's own story is so ridiculous. His own story is that from the ages of 12 to almost 15, this is not his first story. This isn't even his second, third, or fourth story. This is the story he eventually told at a trial, which was totally different. His story is that from the ages of 12 to almost 15, he was abused by Jerry Sandusky in Jerry Sandusky's home almost all the time, 100 times. 100 times. As a, by the way, a competitive wrestler, a competitive track star, a guy who is no wallflower, a guy who, on the record, I've spoken to 12 different people. I haven't released all of them. I've released about 8 or 9 of them. 12 different people. Here's what I have on the record about Aaron Fisher. I have his buddies that were his school buddies at the time in which this happened. They're positive he's lying. It's not even close. I mean, these are close buddies of his, one of whom was a sex abuse victim themselves. So I got about 3 or 4 of those. I got the 2 kids that almost died in a car accident when Aaron Fisher was driving the car. By the way, in Aaron Fisher's book, he laughably tries to blame the car accident on Jerry Sandusky trying to kill him, which is just really flat out bizarre. It was clearly Aaron Fisher's fault. He was speeding in an old jalopy, and frankly, he was lucky to live. This whole case would have been very, very different if things had gone differently in that car accident. But I've spoken to girlfriends of his. I've spoken to members of his immediate family, aunts. I've spoken to the parents of friends of his. I've spoken to his next-door neighbor extensively for hours. When I'm talking about next-door neighbor, I'm talking about this is welfare housing. They're basically living in the same frickin' house. I've spoken to all of the other neighbors in that neighborhood. I've spoken to the people who sponsored the rally for Aaron Fisher when his book came out to support him. Both of these women now believe they were duped and that he was never abused by Jerry Sandusky. So I'm talking 12 people really close are all willing to go on the record for no self-interest, because this is a guy who is a media darling, Aaron Fisher, and who's rich. He's the richest guy in the neighborhood now.
Yeah, he's been enriched.
Right. So there's no reason to go up against him. None.